Who do you know who isn't a Guns N' Roses fan? Whether you're a diehard fanatic like myself, or perhaps just one year you and your boyfriend dressed up as Axl and Slash for Halloween, it all connects to our 6 degrees of GNR bacon. On the AFD show, you take part in the interviews. We're going to talk to some of the most famous, infamous, and unknown in the GNR universe. Appetite for Distortion. Listen and follow on the iHeartRadio app or subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey, it's Steve. Gonna keep it quick today. It's a brand new Murder Monday from Florida in the 70s. And this one's just fun because there's even an unsolved mystery about it. Like an unsolved mystery is like an episode of the TV show. Remember that show? Where it's like, the beat and everything. Yeah, so you decide if this should be an unsolved mystery or not. Glenn Casagra had just found out that he was going to be a grandfather. Overjoyed with the news, he decided it was a reason to celebrate with his 2 best friends, Freddie and Mary Lou Holmes. It was a warm spring evening when the 3 jumped in the boat and made their way to Honeymoon Island. A short ride from the docks in Clearwater, Florida. It's April of 1978. They played music, listened to the waves, and drank beer as they pulled out, riding on the Atlantic until a problem. As the sun began to set, the boat's engine started to sputter, eventually dying. Now stranded, the trio, with only a styrofoam cooler of beer, decided to not allow it to be the hiccup that would ruin their evening. So they decided to float a short distance to something called a spoil bank. The evening was supposed to be a celebration. The 3 didn't have a radio, but figuring they'd eventually get someone to come and pick them up, they decided to make the best of the evening. They pulled the boat up on the beach, built a campfire, and continued to party. It was around 10 p.m. And as the night went on, the couple, Freddie and Mary Lou, started to argue. So Glenn did what any third wheel would do, which is walk away and take a nap behind a bait tank he found. Glenn was deep asleep when he awoke to the sounds of a gunshot. Glenn was over 100 yards from the fire at the time. He laid there frozen until he heard the sounds of a boat motor starting and drive away. He eventually walked back to the spot where the campfire had been set up and found everything in chaos. Their boat looked like someone had tried to sink it, and both Freddie and Mary Lou were nowhere to be seen. Not knowing what happened or what was going to happen next, Glenn knew he needed to get back to land, but the boat wasn't working. So he grabbed the large styrofoam lid from the beer cooler and used it as a flotation device so he could swim back ashore. And as the sun rose to the east, Glenn reached the bank, pulled himself up on the dock. His 2 good friends were dead. Glenn was now cold, wet, and afraid that he might be next. Is he? We'll find out next on Murder Monday. (1978) in Clearwater, Florida. Glenn Casagra is out celebrating good news. He's going to be a grandfather. He heads out on a boat with his good friends, Freddie and Mary Lou. On the way to where they plan to spend a few hours drinking and celebrating, their boat dies. Hoping to make the most of it, they start a fire on a nearby beach that they'd been able to float to, and after a few hours of drinking, Freddie and Mary Lou get into an argument, which is when Glenn decides to wander off and sleep it off. But he awakes a few hours later to gunshots. Glenn returns to the site where he had been hanging. Nothing was like he had left it. He had heard a motor drive away from the island a few minutes after the gunshots, and the boat that he had ridden in had a giant hole in it. And both Freddie and Mary Lou were gone. Not knowing what else to do, Glenn uses the lid of the cooler as a flotation device and makes his way back to dock. But that's when things got strange. Because instead of calling the police and searching for his missing friends, Glenn doesn't say a word. Glenn contacted the police about missing friends, but he then told them a story which really didn't help him at all. When he originally spoke to the police, he said that they were out by the fire. Freddie and Mary Lou had taken the boat to get some beer, but never returned. He never mentioned anything about gunshots or about someone trying to sink their boat. The Coast Guard found the bodies of Freddie and Mary Lou 3 days later. They were naked and tied to a boat engine and anchor. Freddie had been shot twice with a .22 caliber gun, and Mary Lou had been shot with a shotgun. Of course, police didn't believe Glenn's original story and had plenty of reason not to. Glenn was the lone survivor. Investigators then found out that Freddie had gotten a car from Glenn that he was supposed to be paying for, except Freddie never made any payments. And shortly before the murders, Glenn had been talking to friends about the car and how Freddie had taken advantage of their friendship, saying, "I'll take care of him." It was bad for Glenn. So bad that right away he pled guilty to avoid the death penalty. But from that day, Glenn said that he's actually innocent. Sure, that's what plenty of guilty people say. Glenn's family actually hired a private investigator who found inconsistencies in the stories of what witnesses there were. He also did 2 independent polygraph tests on Glenn. Glenn passed both of them. And the crime scene. That pesky crime scene. It showed that there was most likely more than one killer. The weight of the 2 bodies alone were over 300 pounds, plus the weight of the anchor and engine boat made it impossible for just one person to move the bodies from the beach and into the water, like evidence showed. Either way, Glenn was imprisoned until late 1992 when he was paroled. He died 4 years later. But friends and family of Freddie and Mary Lou think his real killer may still be on the loose.